been so long. We're just gonna let the music play. Rock out. We're just gonna let the music play. Rock out. I muted it! Alright guys, let's fade this out. Alright. You know what? Screw it, let's just keep playing that in the background. Really quietly. Alright. Hey guys, how you doing? This is, the Amazombie. I haven't actually done one of these in a long time. I used to do a series with a couple of friends a while back called Yo Graphic Raps. We did a number of episodes, met about monthly, talked about comics, talked about whatever kind of other geek culture stuff we wanted to deal with. Well, what happened is that kind of fell apart. Co-hosts and whatnot, and not to mention life in general. Since that time, I have actually moved to a completely other state. Working at the same place, but also a similar function or a different function. So basically, I've been promoted from where I used to work. Anyway, long story short, I'm at a point now where I have time again. And one of the big things that I wanted to do once I had time again was to get back into doing podcasts, talking comics, talking video games, whatever it might be. And so this is kind of my first attempt to just kind of put it back together. Like I said, it's been a long, long time. So bear with me. This is kind of the prototype or the pilot episode. So I don't have anyone on that I could talk with. Normally I have 2 or 3 people and we would discuss back and forth. I'm hoping if I get back into the groove here that to bring people back in and put back together an actual kind of panel show like how we used to do. But since this is just kind of a pilot, I just wanted to talk a little bit about comics. So recently, one of the big things I do is part of my job is that I get flown around to various parts of the United States. I have to work at different buildings. So one of the big things that I always try to do when I'm at a different town or in a different area is hit up the local comic shops. So what I did this past, alright, I think that's enough of these. Alright. So what I did this past, couple weeks ago, I just got back from Boston and spent most of my time just north of Boston a little ways, within the half-hour north of Boston. We have my work has a building there, so I was sent there for 2 weeks. There's a town called Reading, north of Boston, has a comic shop called Comically Speaking, who are awesome, by the way. It's a great comic shop. The thing that I really like about it is that it gives you the sense of what an old school kind of larger comic shop should feel like. It's filled with kind of older guys that run the place, the owner and whatnot, and all they do is sit around and talk comics all day. They talk shop, right? They're not talking as much about the movies. They're talking about what comic collecting. They're talking about artists. They're talking about whatever. But they have a huge, great. If any of you guys know, the standard in comic shops is to have nowadays kind of the back issues and bins, and then along the walls more hardcore key issues or more expensive issues or whatever you want to call it. So the one thing that I like about this comic shop is it's huge. It has a giant selection, especially of back issues, because I'm a back issues freak. I don't really buy that many of newer issues. So that's one thing I really like about it. So I was down there, and here are the things that I picked up recently. And for anyone who's ever watched the old show or who knows me knows one of my favorite artists is Dave Sim of Cerebus fame. Now, whatever you think of Dave Sim politically, personally, you cannot take away the fact that he's one of the most, still living, one of the most outstanding artists and letterers in the business. Well, so I collect Cerebus, I collect Dave Sim, and what I found was a bit of a funsy for those who may or may not, I'm sure a lot of you remember this, but this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 8, guest starring Cerebus right here. It's a great issue. It's in good condition. They got it for just a few bucks. And it's hilarious to read. So the Turtles get sent back in time to another universe, and they end up meeting with Cerebus and his crew. That's the basis of the issue. Let's see. Other things that I found there were a Cerebus number 18, also, Dave Sim. This is actually really good condition for the price I got it for. I got it for about 20 bucks. And these early issues really only had very few, a very low count print runs. They're a little bit difficult to come by. This is number 18, so this is still in the first chunk, but not that far away from building into the Church and State era. This is still Dave Sim doing the whole comic book. This is before Gerhard was around. But this number 18 issue is in excellent condition, and they can go, if you have like a CGC rated, 9, at least according to the book, they can go as high as like 45, 50 bucks. So I got I think I got a fair deal there, a pretty good, decent deal. Another thing that I found there, which was really exciting, so one thing that I've been looking for a lot, which I know I can go online. I know I can go to eBay or go to whatever. It's not the same. I'm an old school comic guy. I like going into shops. I like talking to comics and artists. I like finding the books, right? But one of the things I've been looking for are the old color issues of Akira. They're a little difficult to come by. Even the collections that you can buy now are the black and white ones. It's actually quite difficult to find the color ones anymore. But the colored ones are amazing. I mean, I like black and white, and they're good. But to me, when you get to the color issues of Akira, it completely brings out even more, like 10 times the detail of what the original black and white had. So, because of that, I did find they have back issues there, Comically Speaking, but I just picked up one or two because I was traveling and I didn't want to carry too much. But I picked up number 7, Akira number 7 here. I mean, these are just gorgeous books. If you have not seen the full color Akiras, they're absolutely wonderful. Now, these earlier ones aren't quite as good as, especially the later ones, but let me see here if I can find a good page here. Most of this is inside of a building, so we're actually missing a lot of detail on the early ones. Oh, that's a shame, we are. But if you've ever seen the movie, you know how it's supposed to look. If you haven't seen the back issues, but I mean, there's some amazing artwork and color in there that just, the coloring really brings out the detail, I believe. If anyone knows, because I have yet to be able to find one of the collections that are in color. If anyone knows if those exist and where to find them, email me or hit me up, because I've been looking forever. Another thing that I bought, again on the Dave Sim kick, this is one of those things that I buy like at every comic shop I go to. I have so many copies of this, but it's a Spawn number 10, again, written by Dave Sim, featuring Cerebus. If you don't remember, Spawn went through a kick in those early days, about, what, 4 or 5 issues, where they had all these guest writers come in and write an issue. And it was like, Neil Gaiman, and that was the number 9, the one with Angela that caused such a legal uproar. There was an issue done by Frank Miller, I believe. There was an issue done by Alan Moore. There was, I think, another one. I can't quite remember all of them, but there was a whole string of issues. And so I buy this because, 1, I just like it. I like Cerebus. But 2, it's an outstanding story. 1, Todd McFarlane, I don't care what people think, he's still not that great of an artist and comic book creator. He's okay. He's not bad. He's good at drawing. What he's not good at is actually layout and storytelling, at least in my opinion. And there's some issues of this, but there's some issues in this issue pertaining to that. But the story is absolutely amazing. Makes a Spawn goes to a realm, and Cerebus talks to him about, you know, all the trapped superheroes being, you know, it's a big metaphor for you know, creators being trapped in their contracts with Marvel, and the characters being stuck, you know. But I always pick it up. It's a great issue. I always read it every time. So another place I went to, though, the second shop I went to was in a town called Haverhill, which is a little more north of Boston. And there's a little shop there called, oh heck, I don't even remember what it's called now. They're subject of a documentary, though. In fact, let me go get that and show you. Yeah, they're subject of a documentary. The store is called The Comic Book Palace, and the documentary is also called The Comic Book Palace. A little hard to see with the glare. Independent documentary, about 45 minutes long. I picked this up at the shop. I decided to check it out. I knew that the shop had been a subject of a small short film, so I thought that I would go out there and check out the documentary and whatnot. Documentary film edited by Felipe George, and it's basically just 45 minutes of them hanging out in a comic, of the guys who hang out and work at the comic shop talking comics, right? Overall, the comic shop is great. It's pretty old school. It's got, you know, it's got very knowledgeable comic book people working in there. The documentary, though, it's kind of fun. It's got some interesting aspects to it. It's a little silly, but in the end, it was left with me going, what was the point of that? I mean, it was entertaining enough, but why did you make the film? Are you trying to show us what it's like to work in comic books? Are you just trying to show us the characters? Are you, you know, it really kind of falls flat and doesn't really give us the story. Anyway, it's a great little comic book shop. If you're in northern Massachusetts, take a stop by. It's kind of hidden away. But anyway, back issues I was able to find there. And this one, only a couple bucks here. Now, if you don't know, this is an Iron Man number 200. This is Obadiah Stone, the Ironmonger. This is the issue where Obadiah kills himself. I was actually surprised that I got it for as cheap as I did from them. I was expecting to pay a few more. But this is an outstanding issue, a great read. Oh, text message. So I advise checking that out. Okay. I also got, this is a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I believe this is number 34 or 36, something like that. This was written, this was like a guest written, I don't even remember. The cover struck me. I read it, it was fun. I don't even really remember much else. About a guy who kind of goes crazy because the Ninja Turtles are out there and no one believes him. Picked up this. Now this is interesting. This is an Uncanny X-Men number 281. This issue kind of speaks to me because it was one that I remembered a lot from my childhood. It was always around, right? It was always. Let's see if the book has anything. It was always traded between our friends. You know, it's not that amazing of an issue. The art is pretty decent. It's Will Spertasio, but it's not anything that great. Let's see. I don't remember, and I think it's also the birth of the Gold Team or something. in that issue. Let me see what the book has to say on it, because I really don't remember. I flipped through it, but I couldn't read it. I mean, it was really not that good. Let's see, what number was it? 281? I just remember the cover. Yeah. So it is the birth of the Whilce Portacio era. This was where Jim Lee ended the issue before. But yeah, the new team begins. The Storm, Archangel, Colossus, Iceman, Marvel Girl. Yeah, the gold team, blue team kind of split. But I just remember that cover. Speaking a little more about comic shops, I went down now in near where I live now in Central California. There's a town called Turlock, and Turlock has a new little comic shop, or relatively new. Hadn't had a chance to check out yet. Every time I had a chance, they were closed. So finally stopped in there yesterday, and it's a little odd. It's this very strange kind of collectible shop. It's kind of it's a little bit stuck between the lines of trying to be like a pure comic book shop and trying to be more of like an expensive, higher end comics and collectibles memorabilia type shop. There's the organization is very poor for like back issues, but there's a lot of like expensive key issues that are sitting out. Like, unlike a lot of comic shops where they're against the wall or high up or in some kind of case, there was a few, but most of them were just sitting on racks. And I mean, we're talking like, you know, the $60 to $200 range comics. And while they had a great selection of that stuff, like I said, there was very little organization to it, and they were just kind of there. But anyway, I was digging through some back issues. It's a good little shop. I mean, worth checking out. My point being that it's just a little hard to tell what kind of store they're trying to be. But it's called Sky High Comics in Turlock, so, I mean, give them some love. So I was digging through a box of just, like, random back issues. A couple things that I found is Comico, who, I love the 80s Comico comics. They're kind of cheesy, the art's kind of silly, but, I mean, that's where Grendel came out of, right? So I found this. It's a number 3, volume 2, number 3 of The Trouble with Girls. Now, if you don't know, this is actually kind of a pretty funny comic series. It was about it's about a guy whose name is like Lester Girls, and it's about like he's like a womanizer, and it's just kind of funny. He tries to like live his life, but keeps having woman troubles. It's pretty silly, kind of, you know, mature things, but not too bad. I also like, one thing I like to do is when I look through issues or like old boxes, is look for those randoms, right? Pick out some random comic you've never heard of, seen of, no one's ever heard of, it's not worth anything, and just give it a read. Check it out and do like a quick review. Well, from Sky High Comics in Turlock, what I found was this Team Nippon. Okay, I don't know if anyone has ever heard of this, but I know I hadn't. It wasn't worth $3, which is what they charged me for it. I mean, I should have paid a quarter out of a quarter bin, honestly. But I was interested. Created by Barry Blair. Yeah, as if anyone really cares. Now, this comic, the art is subpar at best. You know, it's interesting enough. He seems to know how to tell an okay story, but art-wise, it's really not anything amazing. The part that I found interesting that came out of this is this was produced by Air Cell Comics, who was a division of Malibu. And I know a lot of comic book fans know Malibu. But one of the things that came out of here was this ad in the back for a comic series that they also produced called Scimitar. Okay, now this ad looks really bad. It tries to talk about, like, the hottest title of the year returns May 1989, right? But the most interesting thing that I saw that came out of here was I was flipping through and I saw this picture, Scimitar, and I saw this name on the bottom of who drew this ad, this picture here. Now, that is Jim Balent. Now, if you don't know who Jim Balent is, he's famous for his most popular work is, of course, what he still does now, a book called Tarot, Witch of the Black Rose, which is an absolutely hilarious read, by the way. The story is bad. The art isn't that great. But he draws a lot of this woman named Tarot that flies around and is naked, and doesn't really explain why, and then like has like some kind of spells, and then there's like a section in the back where it's like it's like send in your spells, and they have, you know, people who think they're witches like sending in spells, right? It's a pretty silly comic overall, but I found that interesting. I was like, oh, Jim Balent was still just drawing naked women back in 1988. Okay. There's also an ad for Ninja High School, which is something I've heard of. And then the other thing is Leather and Lace. And there's two ads for this, which is some kind of erotic lesbian comic. I don't really know, but it kind of cracked me up. It was an interesting find. Well worth it. The two more back issues that I got out of there, which I picked up primarily just out of curiosity. I don't know how many of anyone who watches this or would watch this remember Charlton Comics. They were an old comic book company. They're no longer around. I believe they were bought by DC, or their rights for their characters were bought by DC, and I believe, if I remember correctly, one of the Charlton superheroes were like the seed for making Watchmen. But I bought a couple of those. This is a Charlton Bullseye #1. And it's the first appearance of the Blue Beetle and the Question. Yeah. Okay. I flipped through this. Looked it up in the book. It can be worth a few bucks, but really not much of interest. It's just kind of old school. Here's an old Charlton Comics from the late '60s. It's a number like 18 or 17 of World on Wheels, right? World on Wheels. Again, just kind of an old school kids book of not really anything that interesting, but I looked up this book, and this is one of the first, like, earlier Charlton Comics, and I guess it's actually worth a few bucks, a few more than what I paid for it. So that was kind of an interesting find. So that's about it for the newer back issues. Let's talk a little bit about what we're reading. Like I said, bear with me here. This is kind of a new format, and hopefully we're gonna clean it up here. But I just wanted to get back into talking about comics and getting the podcast and the stream back up. But what am I reading now? I'm still reading. I just got the collected edition of Trillium, Jeff Lemire's Trillium, and I just love Jeff Lemire's books, so that's quite exciting. I'm halfway through, and it's wonderful. I'm also reading Elephant Man. I've been buying up the volume editions of Elephant Man, which, if you have not read, is an absolutely wonderful comic. One of the few ongoing series that's actually really worth reading, in my opinion. Most of them are they just don't keep my attention as well. The art is wonderful, storytelling is awesome, featuring, of course, the large animals, the anthropomorphized animals, Hip Flask and Ebony Hide and whatnot. I just picked up, I got this month, Terry Moore's Sit Kids, Strangers in Paradise, right? Not too sold on it. I like Terry Moore, but lately, shouldn't say lately. I don't think it's Terry Moore as much as it's me. I've really lost interest in a lot of his books and his old books. Strangers in Paradise, I can't read it like I used to. I have the big double volume collected edition, and it just does not keep my interest. And then I read all of Echo, but I found towards the end of Echo it was getting a little harsh to read. I read the first like 10 issues of Rachel Rising, and I completely lost interest in it. I know a lot of people love it. I found it so. I'm to the point. It's not Rachel Rising that's bad. It's that I'm getting tired of Terry Moore into this formula. It reminds me very much of like Joss Whedon's TV shows where he just has a formula. And again, I like Joss Whedon okay, but I don't really like the Whedon verse, right? Because it's very formulaic. It's not interesting, in my opinion. And it's I kind of get that idea from Terry Moore too. So I don't know. Check it out if you want. If you like Strangers in Paradise. That's about all I have going on. What I've read, back issues. Been working through, talking about movies, been working through, just saw Sin City 2. Let me give a quick review of Sin City 2 if you have not seen it. If you saw Sin City 1 and you really liked it like I did, Sin City 2 is disappointing. I saw it in 3D. It was cool. It was entertaining enough. It just wasn't, it lacked, okay, let's put it this way. The first Sin City had a flow to it where, yeah, it had these separate stories that all kind of interconnected, but each one was clearly defined by like a title card, and, you know, you kind of knew that you were breaking into a different story, right? This one didn't do that. They just kind of switched stories, and it wasn't as easily defined. Second, it was, how do I put it? The first movie, also, each one of the stories had kind of a really odd and strange character. Those being like the Yellow Bastard, right? Or really odd out there, very comic-y, not just noir-y, right? But comic book-like. The Yellow Bastard, the Kevin the Cannibal, and who else? Well, Miho, right? Okay, it's a good example. This one, it was mostly about, it was mostly just violence dealing with the gangsters, and then dealing with Ava Green, who, by the way, Ava Green is smoking. Always has been and always will be. So, it really was kind of missing that comic bookiness that that the first movie still maintained. Another thing is they tried to make Ava Green, who, if you don't know, is just an amazing actress, very gorgeous, but they tried to make her speak in an accent that is not natural, and it didn't really work. I wish that they would have just let her speak in her normal foreign accent. I don't think it would have taken anything away from the character, and it would have made her acting better. But other than that, check it out if you like Sin City. I would give it, like, let's say, what should we do, like a 5-star or 5-star rating? I would probably give it like 3.5 to probably a 3.5. Where the first movie I gave like a 4.5 probably. So it just didn't quite have the same flow, but it was fun. It was worth seeing. Okay, well, other than that, I don't really have much else to talk about comics right now. Oh, and I did just pick up, I haven't watched it yet, Noah on Blu-ray, which is, I love Darren Aronofsky, and Darren Aronofsky, of course, is also very connected to comics, in that Noah had a graphic novel, and so did The Fountain, if you recall. So that's kind of exciting. I haven't watched it yet. I'm going to probably watch it here tomorrow. Don't know if I have time today, but okay. I think that's about it that I have to talk about for today. Hopefully this was somewhat enjoyable. Please feel free to leave me some feedback, and you know, I can check it out. I mean, that's about all I got. I'm hoping to clean this show up and give it more of a structure. I want to maybe do it weekly. Probably just talk about the comics of that week that come out, the comic book movies, whatever geek culture items I just feel like ranting on about. So, thanks again, and I hope you feel like checking me out in the future. Like I said, please feel free to leave me feedback, and I take it to heart. You know, I want to make the show interesting again. So, more music. This is, of course, Elliot Wolof, friends of mine who have given me permission to use their music, so we're just going to let it run for a little bit.
from the sky. It landed on the grass, planted its roots, and just waited there to die. It felt the summer sun, it felt the winter freeze.